Picture this. A Friday night flight over the Caribbean. The cabin lights are dimmed. It's the most unremarkable flight in the world. 2 hours and 40 minutes from San Juan to Fort Lauderdale. A route so routine the crew could probably fly it with their eyes closed. Then, a call button shines. A flight attendant walks back to check. And what she finds changes the entire complexion of this flight. The cabin PA system crackles with 6 words that every passenger dreads, and every doctor on board hopes they never hear. So stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for some extreme turbulence, because this is Final Boarding Call. Hello, and welcome to Final Boarding Call. I am your disaster-obsessed host, Alice.
And I'm Zach.
Okay, our last episode, if you are listening in chronological order, was absolutely brutal. Without a doubt, the most just emotionally trying story that I have told you and told Zach. And I promised at the end of that we would do something a wee bit lighter, maybe even joyful. And that is very difficult to find when you are a transportation disaster podcast. So this episode is inspired and dedicated to the incredible medical personnel and flight attendants that were on my last flight, my flight that I just took back from Dallas, where for the first time in my life, there was a medical emergency. And it was a legit one. I've obviously been on flights where people have needed to use a puke bag, or there was a drunk belligerent person. This was a full-blown medical emergency. And this must have been the luckiest flight in the world, because there were so many medical personnel on this flight that they didn't even need everybody. They had everybody say what they did in a hospital, and they were like, okay, we'll do you, and you. And there were 6 to pick from. That kind of luck is just wild to me.
I'm an oncologist. Well, we don't need you.
It's just crazy. That's so lucky for this poor individual. I do not know this person. I don't even know the gender of this individual. I know nothing. I was many rows back, but I got to witness the flight attendants go into action. And I was so inspired that I wanted to tell you a story of amazing medical things happening on an airplane. So without further ado, are you ready?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Oh, you should be. Okay.
Mostly because that's just how I sit.
Sources for this episode. The official JetBlue Airways statements that they made to the news and media, FAA medical equipment regulations, documentation from the Med-Air and MedLink ground physician advisory services, published interviews with the cabin crew, medical volunteers, and the Journal of Travel Medicine. You know where to find all my sources. Friday night, February 15th, 2019. Hey, Zach, what's the date today?
I don't know. Sometime after Valentine's Day.
Here's what's insane. I didn't even realize that these dates would coincide with each other. It's February 15th.
You're so ridiculous doing this that you subconsciously planned it out?
Yes, I did. I genuinely didn't think about it. Okay, February 15th, 2019. Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The sun set hours ago, and the terminal is alive with the particular energy of a Friday night departure to the mainland. The route from San Juan to Fort Lauderdale is not just a flight path. It is what Puerto Ricans call La Guaga Aérea. I'm so sorry, you guys. Anyway, that does not translate to what it should, but it's supposed to be the flying bus. But I failed Duolingo, clearly. By 2019, Florida has overtaken New York as the primary destination for the Puerto Rican diaspora. And this corridor is the air bridge that connects the two halves of a community split between the island and the mainland. A Friday night flight on this route is rarely filled with tourists. It is filled with weekenders, people heading to Florida to see their grandkids, attend weddings, help a relative move, young nurses and engineers commuting to new jobs. The flight attendants on this route are almost always bilingual. That is good and important to know. And they are known for a warmer, more familiar style of service than what you'd get on a corporate shuttle out of LaGuardia. This isn't a flight. It's a commute between two halves of the same home. And JetBlue Flight 1954 is scheduled for a 10 p.m. departure to Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. 2 hours and 40 minutes gate to gate. One of the shortest overwater flights in the JetBlue network. The aircraft assigned to the flight is an Airbus A320. Registration number, November 523 Juliet Bravo. Look at me. I'm learning now that I need to spell it out like that. Now, every JetBlue aircraft has a name painted on its fuselage.
All of them, huh?
Isn't that cool? It's cool. So, it's just one of those weird little personality touches that the airline is known for. Some are clever, some are punny, some are forgettable, but this one is born to be blue.
All right, then.
Born to be blue. Flight tracking data later suggested that this was a last-minute aircraft swap, meaning that a different plane was supposed to be used
It
for this
pushed
flight.
back and had a technical issue.
Yep. Passengers file down the jet bridge and settle into their seats. Among them is a woman traveling from Puerto Rico to Florida. We don't know her name. The family maintained their privacy throughout the media coverage that followed, and we are obviously going to respect that.
But we
What
do
we
know
know-
she's pregante.
Oh, she real fucking preggy. She is super preggo. And she has no reason to think that tonight will be anything other than a short, uneventful flight to the mainland. And before you're like, oh my goodness, if she is pregnant enough that she could go into labor at any time, I flew until I was 37 weeks pregnant. My
Well, there's a
boss's
whole
boss,
6-week window
Correct.
of when you could give birth.
God, yeah, my boss at the company I was working at eventually was like, Alice, we need to have an intervention. Like, you have to stop traveling. And I think I was just in denial. I was like, I'm fine. I looked and I'm like, oh, shit.
I can't see my feet.
I'm really pregnant. Woof. Airlines have what are called fit-to-fly policies for pregnant passengers. JetBlue's is actually one of the more lenient in the industry. There are no restrictions at all until you're within 7 days of your due date.
Okay.
Get it. No doctor's note required, no medical clearance form, no special screening at the gate. You board like any other passenger, and the system operates on the honor principle. There are some airlines that require medical clearance starting around 28 to 32 weeks, and most international airlines flatly refuse travel after 36 weeks.
I guess that makes sense.
I don't think I ever looked like I was 40 weeks pregnant.
I have a picture of this woman resting her plate on her stomach while she's eating at her desk. Don't listen to her.
What I'm saying, Zach, is like, what is the training that goes into being that gate person?
Yeah, in reality,
and
somebody
being
could just
like,
lie and be like, oh, I'm only
hey,
33 weeks.
You look really pregnant. And a person's just like, I'm just chubby.
Heard.
It's such a, oh God, the secondhand embarrassment for that. Anyway, JetBlue trusts its passengers, God bless them, to know their bodies, know their timelines. The thing about biology, though, is that it does not read airline policy. Babies come when they come. That's it.
To be fair, most labors are 12 plus hours. So on this 3-hour flight, you know, she'll be
It'll be fine. So the doors close. Everybody's seated. The A320 pushes back from the gate and it climbs into the dark Caribbean sky, leveling off at cruising altitude, which for this flight is around 35,000 feet. Inside the cabin, JetBlue's signature blue-purple mood lighting settles over the rows.
Beautiful.
We've got to do a JetBlue flight soon. I just want to say we've done it. I want to fly everything. And then we can do an episode where we just rank. Passengers tilt their seatback screens to the entertainment menu. Tuck blankets around them. They're scrolling their phones. It's a 10 p.m. flight, so, you know, anybody who's done an overnight flight, they ambiance the shit usually out of the flight. It's dark. It's dim. It's very light.
It's relaxing. People can sleep if they want.
Okay, well, it's not going to stay that way for long. The pressurization system does its quiet, essential work, maintaining cabin pressure at an equivalent altitude of right around 6,000 to 8,000 feet. Comfortable enough for most people, especially if you live at altitude, but for a woman about to give birth and for the baby about to take its first breath,
She'd be choking.
that altitude equivalent matters more than anyone on this flight realizes yet. At some point, after reaching cruise, the mother's contractions accelerate. This isn't the early manageable kind of labor or the fake labor pains that a lot of women go through. This is active labor. And active labor sucks. And this is progressing very quickly. The baby is coming whether the plane has landed or not. And on this Friday night in February, on a flight to Fort Lauderdale, the flight attendants are about to discover that their job description has expanded well beyond coffee and snack service. The high priority triple chime sounds throughout the cabin. And this was my first time on my last flight hearing this, but it's literally the ding, 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 and they do it 3 times. So that means that something very serious is happening. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency. If there are any medical professionals on board, please ring your call button immediately. Now, interestingly enough, on the Southwest flight that I was on my way home, they didn't do that. You knew that there was a medical situation going down for sure. They actually had flight attendants come row by row and personally ask every single person on the plane.
Oh.
Which is interesting. I don't know if they do that for
I guess it's lack of panic.
HIPAA or exactly like maybe to keep everybody a little more calm. But for whatever reason on my flight, they did not make the announcement. This announcement doesn't land in silence. And I think this is exactly why they probably didn't do it. Heads snap up from seatback screens. Oh, that's hard to say. The quiet, drowsy energy evaporates. People crane their necks. They are standing up. They are trying to see what is happening. And here's something worth knowing about this specific route. Since the mid-2010s, thousands of Puerto Rican healthcare professionals have been recruited to Florida hospitals.
Oh.
The odds of having medical professionals on this flight?
High.
The medical lottery has better odds on this route. And tonight, this mother is gonna hit the jackpot because a pediatrician and a nurse both stand up from their seats and they make their way toward the back of the plane. A pediatrician.
God bless.
Literally, a baby and a child doctor. Like, is responding to a labor emergency. The odds of that specific match, crazy. I do need to say up front that the names of the mother, the pediatrician, and the nurse have never been publicized. They do not exist. You will not find them. And this is because of
But I bet
HIPAA.
they're best friends by now.
Oh my God, I hope they still keep in touch. There's a bunch of things. It's HIPAA, JetBlue respected their privacy and never released this. And also just kind of what I refer to as the humble hero factor. A lot of medical professionals, like this is just what they, like to them, this is not some exceptional, you lifted a car off of a baby. This is what they do for a living, and they are stepping up to do what they know how to do. Okay. While the volunteers reach the mother, the cabin crew snaps into a choreography that's been practiced in training but rarely performed live. In aviation emergency medicine, the roles are defined and automatic. The first crew member on scene becomes the assessor, hands-on with the patient, running through a triage protocol called SAMPLE, SAMPLE, to gather critical information. This is symptoms, allergies, medications, previous medical history, last meal, events leading to the emergency.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a long list of events. So, my husband and I, when two people are in love.
It was Thanksgiving. The second crew member becomes the communicator, the information relay between the cabin, the senior crew, and the cockpit. The third becomes the collector, pulling the emergency medical kit, oxygen bottles, and supplemental supplies from the galley compartments. How cool is that? Everybody has a super defined role. So it's like, you know exactly, you're on, I'm on, you have your job, I have my job.
It is the best way. Get some of them cooks out the kitchen.
Absolutely incredible. But before any of that can happen, they need a place to work.
Probably the floor in the back by the bathrooms, typically.
An A320 lavatory is roughly 3 feet by 3 feet. Physically impossible for a delivery involving a mother, a doctor, and a nurse. So the crew does what flight attendants have been doing in these situations for decades. They turn the rear galley into a delivery room. God. The beverage carts get pulled from their docks and locked in the aisle. This opens up the largest flat floor space in the aircraft. It's unlike the carpeted cabin aisles. It's made of lawn seal, which is a slip-resistant, non-porous vinyl that can be sanitized.
Perfect.
Yes, right? Layers of blankets and absorbent pads from the medical kit go down on the floor and create a cushioned surface.
They are necessary too.
Oh, God, they are. It's a whole thing. The class divider curtains comes off of its hooks. Flight attendants hold up open blankets, creating a human curtain between the galley and the last rows of seats because you want privacy. Giving birth is a very intimate thing.
Yeah.
It's something I would never, ever want to do in front of somebody I didn't know. For those of you that are not personal friends of ours, we had a home birth and it was horrible and wonderful and insane. But I was in the comfort of my own home. I was in a place where I was able to move and stretch, and I could
scream,
bend, and I could be on a bouncy ball thing. And like I had these things kind of naturally help me through it. Overhead, they isolate the lighting. The main cabin stays in its blue-purple sleep mode while the galley work lights get cranked to full brightness, baby, giving the medical team a clear view. For passengers in the front of the aircraft, the flight might seem almost normal. A flurry of crew activity toward the back, some muffled announcements, and maybe a sense that something is happening, but they're so far separated that, they don't really know what's going on. They can see the human curtain of blankets. They can hear the rhythmic breathing of the mother, the low-toned coaching of a doctor, the distinct hiss of a portable oxygen bottle, the constant high-low chime of the interphone, the crew communication system, and pings between the galley and the cockpit as the communicator relays updates. Passengers turn down their headphones. Everyone in the back half of the cabin is listening for a very specific sound. They're waiting to hear a baby cry.
It doesn't happen that fast, guys.
I'm telling you, Zach, if this is not your first kiddo, and sometimes even if it is your first kiddo, it goes a lot faster. Just saying. At some point, women do say, I am not this woman because I only have one child, but women who I know have like 4 or more kids, they're like, oh my God, by the end you stand up and the baby's just like, boop, there it is. While the pediatrician and nurse work with the mother, the cockpit activates the invisible backbone of the entire operation, a direct satellite link to a ground-based emergency room physician. And I saw this and I was texting Zach updates the entire time. Of course. Duh. But I saw one of the, I guess it was the person responsible for communication in this team, but he had a huge headset on with a little mouthpiece. I figured he was communicating with the pilots to determine if they needed to make an emergency landing.
But
However, I asked him at the end of the flight, I was like, hey, so I'm a nerd. What were you doing? Tell me everything. And he told me that it was a satellite phone that connected directly to a hospital. Boom. And I'm going to tell you where this came from because the history of this is wild. It's a service called MedLink, and it was actually born from tragedy. In 1985, a flight nurse named Joan Garrett watched a medical evacuation fail and realized that pilots and crew needed more than radio frequencies and guesswork. They needed a board-certified ER doctor on the other end of a phone line available around the clock, anywhere in the world.
Valid. I don't
and guess
disagree.
what? She founded a company called MedAir. And in 1987, the first MedLink call came in from an American Transair flight over the Atlantic. The signal was relayed through a radio station in Stockholm, Sweden, to a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow.
The ground doctor in Phoenix was able to diagnose a heart attack over the phone, and they saved that passenger's life.
I love that.
So guess what? It's 2019.
We've had plenty.
It's righty-tighty at this point. It's been very cleaned up. It is a crystal clear satellite phone. It's built into the aircraft. And when the cockpit on Born to Be Blue dials MedLink, they are connected to a level 1 trauma center where an ER physician pulls up the specific medical kit inventory on that flight. Describe my face.
Ridiculous.
That's fine. I think this is so cool. The doctor is now part of a 3-way conversation. The flight deck managing the airplane, the cabin crew relaying the mother's condition, and the ground physician who is coaching the volunteers through the delivery and advising the captain on a critical decision, whether to divert or whether to proceed.
All right.
And that decision is more complicated than it sounds. As the A320 cruises northwest toward Florida, the captain has several out options below him.
I was curious how many there could possibly be on a fairly short flight over the ocean.
That's a great question. So there's Grand Turk and Providenciales, and those are the closest land masses. They have runways, but their medical facilities are essentially small community clinics. They do not have neonatal intensive care units. There's no specialized pediatric team. So if the baby arrives in distress, it would actually probably need to be flown to another location, right? We also have Nassau in the Bahamas, and that has a major airport, but landing there means an international arrival.
Oh, yeah, that's a pain.
You can't do that. That's immigration complications, customs delays, a newborn without a passport. Turning back to San Juan means flying against the headwinds.
Which slows you down, and even if you're only 35% of the way there, you have that same amount of time.
I mean, that's a lot of things to be thinking about, but all of them are very important. The ground physician is performing what amounts to a triage of infrastructure. The question isn't just where's the nearest runway, it is where's the nearest neonatal team. And if the delivery is progressing normally, no breach, no hemorrhage, no fetal distress, then the safest option might very likely be just to proceed to Fort Lauderdale at 35,000 feet, heading directly for one of the best equipped neonatal centers in the country. The A320 is functioning as a high-speed ambulance.
Let me just turn the throttle up. We'll get there.
It's so insane. Diverting to a remote island could really just make the situation
It throws
way
a
worse.
wrench in the whole thing.
But the environment inside the high-speed ambulance is actively working against the medical team, and every minute of altitude adds risk. Start with oxygen. At a cabin altitude equivalent of 6,000 to 8,000 feet, the partial pressure of oxygen is lower than at sea level. That's how elevation works. For a healthy adult in their seat watching a movie, the difference is negligible. But for a woman in the physical exertion of active labor, whose oxygen demand has spiked dramatically, it is a very real concern. And for the baby, and this is really a critical part, a newborn's first breaths are already a massive physiological transition. The infant is switching from receiving oxygenated blood through the umbilical cord to breathing air through its own lungs for the first time. Doing that in thin air where there's less oxygen per breath compounds the challenge significantly. If the baby can't maintain adequate blood oxygen levels, it turns blue or it slips into respiratory distress. The portable oxygen bottles come out immediately for both mother and for baby if needed.
Excellent. Good to have them on standby.
Good to have them on standby. I will say that, we were fortunate enough to have midwives active at our birth, but we obviously are at elevation. We're in Colorado, and we didn't have any issues.
I think part of that is from being here the whole time, though. You weren't in as much distress without it, so.
Correct. I'm totally acclimated. 100%. Okay. Then there's temperature. Aircraft cabins are notoriously dry. They really are. Humidity levels often sit below 10%, which is drier than the Sahara Desert. Comfortable. A newborn arrives wet, covered in amniotic fluid. In that low humidity, high airflow environment, the A320's ventilation is loudest in the galleys. Moisture evaporates off of the baby's skin very rapidly, and with it goes body heat. Newborns can't shiver. They can't shiver.
Should I describe this face too?
Like, oh, babies.
Also ridiculous.
Can't shiver. Okay. Technically, the article said they can't shiver to generate warmth the way adults can, so maybe they can shiver. I don't know. But they can't do it the way we can. Their core temperature can crash within minutes, and neonatal hypothermia leads to metabolic acidosis and respiratory failure. Every blanket on that airplane has become critical in the back of the plane. They're just going to bundle that little thing up like a friggin' 7-layer Chipotle burrito.
Beefy 5-layer from Taco Bell.
Amen. And there's a subtler danger that most people wouldn't even think about. At reduced cabin pressure, trapped gas expands. For the mother, this means increased gastrointestinal pressure. That's during an already very physically overwhelming process. For the baby, if there's any trapped air in the lungs or the digestive tract during those critical first moments of life,
those tiny lungs could pop.
They expand, potentially causing pain, Zach, popping, or complications that, no, you're going to be grounded. Stop it. Do not do that. Inappropriate. I'm calling inappropriate conduct. Yell at Zach in the comments, not me. It expands at altitude, potentially causing pain or complications that wouldn't exist at sea level. The pediatrician and nurse crack open the emergency medical kit. Let's see what's in here. You guys have been waiting for it. It is a bag. It's a bag that the FAA requires on every commercial aircraft under federal regulations 14 CFR 121.803. You know, just that tiny little byline there or whatever. Inside is a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, oropharyngeal airways in multiple sizes, including pediatric, a self-inflating resuscitation bag, IV supplies with saline, syringes, and injectable medications, including epinephrine and dextrose. Beyond the FAA minimum, JetBlue carries enhanced kits.
You go, JetBlue.
Hats off for JetBlue. And those items are critical for delivery. They have umbilical cord clamps, a bulb syringe for cleaning out a newborn's airway, sterile gloves, and absorbent pads.
Love it.
Hey, that's not bad for an airplane. It is also, for the worst case scenario, terrifyingly inadequate.
Well, yeah.
You know.
But you're not supposed to be giving birth on a plane.
In theory. The EMK does not contain blood products. It does not contain Pitocin or oxytocin. The medications used in hospitals to stop postpartum hemorrhage, which is, in my opinion, the most feared complication in giving birth, post-giving birth. That's where things can go really, really wrong really fast. If this mother hemorrhages at 35,000 feet, the medical team's options are very limited. Basically, they have IV fluids. There's no surgical intervention. There's no blood transfusion, no neonatal incubator if the baby arrives in distress. There is no 911 at this altitude. And for the doctors, there is the satellite phone, there is a big bag of supplies, and there's the knowledge of whoever happened to be sitting in those seats. Tonight, the right people happen to be there. The delivery progresses. It progresses. The pediatrician manages the birth with the nurse assisting. The communicator relays updates to the ground physician, and somewhere over the dark waters of the Caribbean, at approximately 11:24 p.m., a baby boy takes his first breath on the galley floor of an Airbus A320 6 miles above the ocean.
Where were you born? Well, I could give you coordinates.
And then the sound that everyone in the back half of the cabin has been waiting for. A baby's first cry. On a Puerto Rico flight, there is a long-standing tradition of passengers applauding when the plane touches down, which is an expression of relief and joy at arriving home, whether home is the island or the community waiting in Florida. On this night, the plane erupts into applause when that baby makes its little sound. It comes from the back rows, it spreads forward, and word ends up passing through the entire airplane of what just happened. The ground physician assesses the reports from the cabin. Stable mom, stable baby. We've got good baby breaths, the vitals are within an acceptable range, and the decision is confirmed. We're going to Florida. Full EMS is waiting on the ground. Had the delivery gone sideways, the ground doctor would have made a call for an immediate diversion, but this was an incredibly clean and simple delivery. I mean, this woman, badass. Just before 11:30 p.m., the flight touches down at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International. When the wheels hit the tarmac, the traditional landing applause is reportedly twice as loud as usual, and this time it isn't for the pilots. Paramedics board through the rear door and make their way into the galley. The mother is placed on a stretcher, exhausted but smiling. A medical professional follows, carrying a small, blanket-wrapped bundle. Both are transported to a local hospital. Both are healthy, and JetBlue has just gained what it later calls its youngest customer to date.
And they always regretted not charging it.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
But that outcome is not guaranteed, and it's not typical. And to understand why what happened on Born to Be Blue, remember that's the name of the plane, qualifies as a near miracle, we need to talk about what happens when the medical lottery does not pay off. In 2022, a woman went into labor on a Frontier Airlines flight. And I don't mean to shit on Frontier, but if there is an airline that I had to go into labor on, Frontier would literally be the bottom. The PA announcement went out and nobody responded, because what doctor is going to be flying
Frontier.
on Frontier? But there weren't just no doctors. There were no nurses, no paramedics, no midwives, no one with any medical training beyond what they'd picked up from television.
So you're saying the most highly qualified person there to help that woman deliver a baby
Had seen
would be
all
me, because
seasons of like Grey's Anatomy.
No, I was saying
or House.
It would be me because I was at least there for you.
Actually, yes. I feel like at some point you get to like, okay, who's assisted through a non-medicated labor? Flight attendant Diana Giraldo was working the back of the cabin, and she guided the mother to the rear galley, the only semi-private space on the aircraft, and prepared to deliver this baby herself. She had completed her airline's emergency childbirth training. She had practiced on mannequins. She had never delivered a real baby in her life. She managed the delivery using the onboard kit: gloves, absorbent pads, the bulb, syringe, supplemental oxygen. And when the baby arrived, it wasn't breathing. Giraldo used the syringe to clear the infant's airway and the oxygen to stimulate the first breath. She later described her approach: "I am a calm and soft-spoken person, and that's how I reacted. The baby couldn't wait." The plane made an emergency landing. Both mother and baby did survive. The mother was so moved by Giraldo's composure under pressure that she gave her daughter the middle name Sky. Now, hold that story in your mind and consider this one. In 2021, a woman named Lavi Monga boarded a Delta Airlines flight from Salt Lake City to Honolulu. Oh my God. This to me is an actual nightmare, because where are you diverting to? This flight is just like the ocean. It's all the ocean.
Yep.
Oh my God. She went into the lavatory during the flight, and she actually gave birth at 29 weeks. Having had, I'm glad you're sitting, Zach. She had no idea she was pregnant.
Those ones are so weird
I
to
know.
me.
I knew. Literally knew it was coming. It was a cryptic pregnancy, and it is actually relatively common in women with conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome or irregular cycles. You cannot enforce a fit to fly policy against a pregnancy the mother herself does not know about. So she later describes the shock as simply, "I just didn't know I was pregnant, and then this guy just came out of nowhere." A 29-week premature baby. And you guys, that is preemie. That is preemie. Born in an aircraft lavatory with no advance warning. This is every airline's nightmare scenario. A baby that is premature, needs medical attention immediately, weighing just over 2 pounds. Specialized equipment, like that's... The sad little medical kit on board isn't going to touch this situation. But on this flight, the medical lottery delivered the most improbable jackpot. Because guess what? Among the passengers were a family physician named Dr. Dale Glenn and 3 NICU nurses.
I'm going to be honest. That one doesn't shock me that much. Like, oh, doctors going to Hawaii?
3 NICU nurses?
They
Are
were
you
friends.
shitting
They
me?
were all going together. Gosh.
Oh my gosh. They used shoelaces to tie the umbilical cord and an Apple Watch to monitor the baby's heart rate. Talk about
Technology. Technologia.
Dr. Glenn later reflected on the absurdity of the coincidence. I don't know how a patient gets so lucky to have 3 neonatal intensive care nurses on board the same flight. The plane made an emergency landing in Honolulu, which is
Where
it was going. Mm-hmm. And the baby survived.
That's wild. Especially being that preemie.
These are the stories that make the news. The ones with the happy endings, the ones where the right people were somehow in the right place. But there's a version of this story that doesn't get told as often. And trigger warning for child death. If that is something that impacts you, just skip ahead a few minutes, please. In 2022, on a Turkish Airlines flight from Istanbul to Kuala Lumpur, a 28-year-old woman went into premature labor. Passengers with medical experience assisted, but the baby was stillborn. The medical team then had to pivot from trying to save the infant to trying to save the mother, who had a postpartum hemorrhage. Ugh. The exact nightmare scenario that, for me, is like, that's really why giving birth on an airplane is absolutely terrifying. A study published in the Journal of Travel Medicine examined 74 documented in-flight births between 1929 and 2018. At least 2 of those infants died shortly after delivery. The aircraft cabin lacks everything a premature or distressed newborn would need to survive. Incubators, specialized ventilation, the ability to run any test. Like how you can't. And sometimes the failure isn't about who's on board. It's about who's allowed to help. Get this, Zach. This story is crazy. In 2016, a medical emergency unfolded on a Delta Airlines flight. The PA went out asking for a doctor. A physician named Dr. Tamika Cross raised her hand. The flight attendant looked at her and said, "Oh no, sweetie, put your hand down." She was asked to show her credentials, something the doctors very rarely carry in their carry-on luggage. A nurse who was white was allowed to assist instead. Mm-hmm. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you will recognize a pattern. We talk a lot about cockpit resource management, hierarchies, assumptions, and biases, and how that can prevent somebody from taking action in a moment that's needed. And it can have really sad consequences. So the same dynamic plays out in the cabin. Dr. Cross was a qualified physician who was willing and ready to help. And she was sidelined because she didn't match somebody's mental image of like, oh, you don't look like the doctor in Grey's Anatomy. The incident sparked industry-wide policy changes. Most major airlines now instruct their crews to accept a volunteer's credentials at face value during an emergency, rather than being blatantly racist. So that's a win. Before 1998, doctors on commercial flights routinely refused to help during medical emergencies.
Because they were on vacation, baby.
No, because they were afraid. There was no federal protection for physicians who volunteered to help. Yes. If the patient had a bad outcome, the doctor could be sued for malpractice in a setting where they had no proper equipment, no patient history, no hospital backup. I mean, that's terrifying. So Congress addressed this in 1998 with the Aviation Medical Assistance Act, which shields volunteer medical professionals from liability as long as they act in good faith and they aren't grossly negligent. I mean, the law is specifically designed to stop the chilling effect and to make it legally safe to be a good Samaritan. No good deed goes unpunished, baby. But it created its own uncomfortable edges. There's a widely discussed case of a physician who refused to respond to an in-flight medical call because he'd been drinking in the airport lounge. No.
How do you treat that? He still has the most knowledge, but he's not trusting himself enough because he was drinking.
The passenger next to him was furious, told him that it would be his fault if the sick person died. But that doctor made the correct legal and ethical choice. under the AMAA providing care while intoxicated is one of the few ways to void your Good Samaritan immunity and expose yourself to a gross negligence claim. He was not being a coward. He was recognizing that helping while impaired would not do very much good. And the stakes for airlines are even higher. So oh my gosh, you guys, this is crazy. In 2025, this just happened. A jury returned a $9.6 million verdict against American Airlines after a passenger named Jesus Plasencia suffered a stroke mid-flight and the airline failed to properly activate its ground medical link or follow its own emergency protocols. Volunteer doctors are protected. Airlines, not so much.
This is your duty. These are your people right now. Do it.
Yeah. I mean, all they had to do was just pick up the MedLink satellite phone. And they didn't. One more wrinkle. When a baby is born on a plane, someone has to figure out where that baby is a citizen.
That was my curiosity for the diversion.
So for the JetBlue baby, it was straightforward. Born on a U.S. registered aircraft flying between 2 U.S. jurisdictions. Bada bing, bada boom. You're an American. Welcome to America, baby. But the edge cases get fascinating. A baby born over international waters generally takes the parent's citizenships, not the plane's registration. Canada grants citizenships to anyone born in Canadian airspace.
I'm sure they do.
And then there's the case that airlines cite as their worst nightmare. In 2015, a Taiwanese woman on a China Airlines flight to Los Angeles. She is Taiwanese. It is a China Airlines flight, and she is flying to LA. And she went into labor. It was later alleged she had deliberately concealed a 36-week pregnancy by wearing baggy clothes, telling crew she was just bloated to ensure her baby would be born over U.S. territory and qualify for American citizenship. The flight was forced to divert to Alaska, costing the airline over $33,000 in fuel, landing fees, and passenger compensation. The mother was deported back to Taiwan upon arrival. The baby, as a U.S. citizen, was placed in state custody. The airline reportedly pursued legal action to recover the diversion costs. That's a crazy story. Jesus. That's not a happy one. It's a reminder that for every born to be blue miracle, there's something dark and crazy that happened. All right, let's wrap this story up. Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, just before 11:30 p.m., Friday, February 15th, 2019, JetBlue Flight 1954 touches down on the runway and taxis to the gate where the EMS team is waiting. Everybody is healthy, but by the next morning, JetBlue's social media team is in full gear.
We deliver babies.
The tweets are tweeting. Remember Twitter? The airline tweets about giving storks a day off and announces plans to rename the aircraft after the baby, with the mother's permission, of course. They use the hashtag airborne.
That's pretty good.
Which is admittedly really good. They promise baby shower gifts. The story goes pretty viral for 48 hours. One of those warm, shareable human interest moments that cuts through the news of just dark shit. The family did keep their privacy. The baby's name was never released, so the plane is not named after it. The pediatrician and the nurse also remain anonymous. A JetBlue ground operations member named Yaki Ramos posted on social media thanking the in-flight crew and an airport operations leader named Angie for their work. And that is literally the only names in this story. That's it. But here's what stays with me. Every commercial flight, we bet that nothing will go wrong medically. The system that catches those emergencies when they do happen is remarkable, and it's remarkably fragile. It depends on volunteer doctors who may or may not be on your specific flight, and also them being sober. It depends on satellite phones connecting to ER physicians thousands of miles away. And it depends on flight attendants trained to deliver babies between beverage services and perform CPR in a space the size of a closet. And it depends on a medical kit that is both impressive and also very sad. And Zach, that is our story for today.
Well, I would say the key takeaway is if you're going to be having a baby in the air, fly JetBlue.
Oh my gosh. It's a pretty incredible story. And I hope that it makes up a little bit for the really bummer one of last week. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are on social media, so feel free to follow us there. More importantly, email us with your name, address, and a screenshot of your review, and we will send you a sticker. We are at finalboardingcallpodcast@gmail.com. And join us next time when we'll be exploring another transportation disaster story. Until then, remember to stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for the unexpected, because not every trip reaches its final destination.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.